Hey everyone, welcome to Remnant 2 Apocalypse Tested. Today we'll be looking at the sizable selection of shotguns. Now before we get into covering the weapons, I want to give a breakdown as to how I'll be structuring these videos. Obviously Remnant 2 has a lot more moving parts when it comes to balance, power gain, build diversity, etc. Because of that, there are way more options of raising up equipment to be viable for the highest level of play. What I mean is that I'll only cover one or two playstyles for each weapon, archetype, relic, etc. Remnant 2 features over 200 trinkets, 110 archetype combinations, 27 slottable mods, 17 mutators, 21 relics, and 39 relic fragments. And that's a lot to keep track of. So if I miss a trinket combination or playstyle you like, leave it down in the comments. Starting with my favorite returning weapon from the first game is the shotgun, now going by the name of Ford Scattergun. It's pretty much a one-for-one copy of the version from Remnant 1. The only changes the weapon has received is a slight ideal range buff from 7 to 10 meters, and a slight reload speed nerf. It still features a static spread, which is complemented by the further reaching range. It also has a new chunky firing sound, which I am a huge fan of. Just like in the original series, I'll be running a setup with no boosts to see how the weapon performs on a surface level. Going against the Daaaamn, the weapon has an immediate issue, that being its spread. Unless you barrel stuff your gun into their head, you'll have a difficult time landing weak spot hits against smaller targets. And when you do manage to hit every pellet, the damage isn't actually that bad. But it's still no match for the majority of Apocalypse's challenges. Let's see how we can up this weapon's performance. The most obvious one being Hunter Gunslinger, or Hugs for short. I could make this entire series riding on Hugs, but that wouldn't be very interesting to watch. Hugs alone provide such a massive boost in performance, it's honestly a little ridiculous. Here I am against a hardy Bloat King with no trinkets, no fragments, no mods or mutators. And while I'm not speed killing him, I'm not dealing an insignificant amount of damage either. If you want maximum gun performance, Hunter, Gunslinger, and Challenger are your best bets. I, however, will try and provide as many unique setups for every weapon in this series. That being said, if I end up running Hugs or one of the other optimal gun boosting archetype combos in the future, it's probably because I was really desperate. Now for mitigating the spread, we have plenty of options. First we have the Tranquility Font Concoction, which reduces it plus recoil and sway by 35%. Then there is the Handling trait, which reduces spread and recoil by 40%. For rings we have Focusing Shard, Point Focus Ring, and Targeting Jewel. Then we have the Weapon Spread Fragment. Finally, there is Hunter's Focus. Now obviously, you don't want to run everything I just mentioned together. Spread reduction has a hard cap at minus 100%. The stats can display it going higher, but it doesn't do anything. And since every source is additive, you really only need 2 to be comfortable and 3 to completely remove it. For my build, I'll be running the Point Focus Ring, Spread Reduction Fragment, and the Tranquility Font Concoction. Now for speeding up the reloads. Gunslinger has several methods of reloading faster or even instantly. Bulletstorm gives 20% fire rate and 50% reload speed, and also instantly reloads our weapons on kill. I'll also be running Void Idol for the boosted reload speed and ammo conservation. The shotgun is neat in that it'll only take ammo from reserves for every other shell loaded. Now that our damage, spread, and reload speed are taken care of, that leaves us with 3 more ring slots, 2 more fragment slots, a mod, and mutator. I would suggest some extra range trinkets, but thankfully Hunter is already giving us 6 more meters. For the rest of my ring slots, I went with boosting my reload speed and damage even further. For the mod, I chose the Classic Hotshot, and for the mutator, I chose Refunder. Combined with Void Idol and the increased reserves from Gunslinger, my plan was to never run out of ammo. For my last 2 fragment slots, I chose ammo reserves and reduced recoil. This setup effectively turned my shotgun into a high-powered rifle. It can easily one-shot basic Dran fodder. As good as having all of the spread reduction is, I actually end up missing shots due to how small the crosshair becomes. When you land those weak spot hits though, those do be some good looking damage numbers. Going back to Bloat King is when I realized I probably didn't need all that extra ammo. My damage was pretty much the same, since I only added Stone of Balance and Hotshot into the mix. But my goal was met. I never once ran out of ammo. Other than that though, I consider Ford Scattergun definitely Apocalypse ready. The Coach Gun makes its return in Remnant 2, similar yet different to its original counterpart. For starters, the weapon no longer fires shells. It is now a slug-based shotgun. Along with that, it has received several stat changes. Its damage and ideal range were increased, but the rate of fire was very slightly decreased. I actually really like these changes. The switch from shell to slug means you don't need to worry about spread reduction much, if at all. That doesn't mean it can't miss. For some reason, occasionally it seems your shots will severely deviate from the crosshair. I personally noticed this happening less with spread reduction sources, but keep it in mind if you aren't running any. Even without damage boosting sources, you can pretty easily 2-tap most trash mobs. Were I a better shot, I could even take down these Naru drones in a single slug. The immediate obvious downside, as it was in 1, is the small magazine size of 2. This leads to constant reloading, which thankfully isn't that long. The fix that immediately comes to mind is Extender. Although the description mentions only giving 40% increased clip size, the math actually rounds up and lets us load one more slug. That plus the 15% bonus reload speed makes the weapon perform far better on Apocalypse. You could also run Bandit for the chance to get 3 or more shots per clip, but that style relies on RNG. You could be unlucky and get multiple clips where the mutator doesn't proc. Extender gives a consistent boost in performance, even if it can't match the insane potential that is Bandit. So what else can we do to help out the gun? Well, we can run one of the elemental bullet mods for extra damage and a free reload. Corrosive Rounds increases our crit chance by 15%, and applies the corroded effect to enemies. Corroded increases the damage enemies take by an additive 10%. For our archetype, we can use Invader's Reboot to instantly reload our weapon and regain some ammo reserves. And Alchemist's Frenzy Dust will help us get more out of our Reboot and Corrosive Rounds. For trinkets, I ended up throwing on some crit and weak spot boosting ones. The same could be said about my fragments. Since I decided on running Alchemist as my prime, I grabbed a few concoctions for comfort. This setup ended up being very fun to mess around with. I'm still bad at managing my skill usage, but in the right hands I know the setup can shine. Nightweaver's Grudge pairs perfectly with the Coach Gun since they both have a 15-meter range. Akari Warband becomes easier to proc thanks to the increased evade window from Invader. I did end up grabbing Handling, but I realistically didn't need it. Corrosive Rounds proved to be a top tier mod as always, putting in work to get those juicy crit hits. While not an optimal setup, it's still loads of fun, and definitely proof of the weapon being Apocalypse ready. The Sporebloom is just as deadly as it was in Remnant 1. Much like the other returning weapons, it is nearly a 1-to-1 copy, the major changes being to its damage type, effective range, and Spore Shot. Since rot damage is not present in Remnant 2, it has been changed to do pure physical damage. Its range has also been increased by 1 meter. And finally, Spore Shot has had its blast damage reduced, but in return has received a massive increase to its blast and cloud radius, as well as 3 more seconds to its duration. It now also applies the general slow debuff. Performance-wise, obviously the damage is very good. Landing a weak spot hit deals 1200 damage. And while that doesn't one-shot the root centipedes of Yeisha, a small damage boost will change that. The mod can also be a bit dangerous to use in close quarters. Unless you invest in kinship, the blast can easily one-shot you, and the cloud left behind also rapidly drains your health. At least it's super cheap though. Right off the bat, we're throwing Slayer on this bad boy. If the Bandit Mutator weren't bugged, I would throw that on instead. 120 bonus damage and faster reloads are always nice. Tranquility Font, Handling, and the Spread Reduction Fragments make it a sniper rifle. Hunter's Shroud and Invader's Wormhole both work excellently at boosting your damage to absurd levels. The Sporebloom's reload speed is actually perfect with Hunter's Shroud. By the time you reload, you've already cloaked again, ready to reapply the mark and refresh the damage buff. Sporebloom is fantastic at maintaining the uptime of Hunter skills. 55 based weak spot damage increases the duration of Hunter skills by 3.5 seconds. The Sporebloom does 1200. One shot adds about 10 or more seconds to its duration. Because of that, I actually think we are fine on reload speed. For my trinkets, I went with Shield Synergy and weak spot boosts. Tightly Wound Coil activates every shot with Sporebloom. 5% shield isn't a lot, but it doesn't need to be. It activates Difference Engine, boosting our damage and giving us lifesteal, as well as Generating Band, giving us constant health regen. I also grabbed Siphoner for a bit more lifesteal. The idea being, if I get hurt, I can passively regen and steal back life. That frees up my relic slot to be used for skill cooldown via Diverting Heart. I also tossed on crit chance and weak spot damage for my last 2 fragment slots. This build was pretty good. I mean, of course it is, the Sporebloom is a powerhouse. Hitting for upwards of 7k damage occasionally means we're tearing through bosses fairly easily, and should something not kill us in one hit, it'll soon wish it did. Is there any question if this thing is apocalypse ready? Last of the returning long gun shotguns, we have the Repulsor. It's slightly different than its original version. Like with the other shotguns, its range has been increased, in this case by 5 meters. Its total ammo has also been increased by 5. And finally, Banish's bonus damage against afflicted targets has been reduced by 10%. Let's start with the good aspects. Just like in Remnant 1, Banish is very powerful and has good utility. Removing a threat from a fight can temporarily buy you time to reposition, heal, reload, etc. You could also save a teammate from a deadly attack in co-op, and the damage boost is still really nice. Now on to the negative aspects. Much like the shotgun and coach gun, the damage isn't bad, but its slow reload speed and spread hold it back. The slow reload speed is only compounded by the kinda low clip size. Then there is the issue of spam firing it. Just like in Remnant 1, the spread is reduced over a short period of time while aiming. This bonus, however, is reset upon firing, meaning you need to time your shots to consistently reap the benefit. This can cause issues when being swarmed by smaller targets like the Fae or Dran. Good luck landing every pellet on a toothpick that is 3 inches from your face. So what can we do? Well, just like with the coach gun, Extender helps both the magazine size and reload speed. Challenger and Gunslinger both have skills that improve fire rate and reload speed as well. The combination of Rampage and Bulletstorm can turn any semi-automatic weapon into a monster. Gunslinger's Charm and Blackout Ring both push this even further. Since we are running Challenger, I decided to throw on the Burden of the Destroyer. The loss of ideal range actually brings the Repulsor to 9.75 meters, nearly perfect for the Challenger's damage buffing radius. Since we don't have a damaging mod, I picked Stone of Expanse for more damage, and to extend the duration of our skills, I grabbed Stone of Continuance. As for my fragment slots, I chose Spread Reduction, Fire Rate, and Skill Duration. Of course, I also picked up the Spread Reduction concoction. I'm gonna stop mentioning it for the rest of the video, just assume I'm running it for every shotgun. And for the traits, I grabbed Handling and Flashcaster. Flashcaster is seriously good at speeding up both Rampage and Die Hard from Challenger. Now with its pinpoint accuracy, the weapon performs very well. Assuming you can land all your shots, you can drop even the chunkiest of elites in just a mag or two. And against bosses where there isn't any downtime for Banish, you can seriously put out some respectable damage. It might take some tweaking, but I would certainly say it's apocalypse ready. Moving on to the new shotgun additions in Remnant 2, we have the Bulldog. This scrap version of an AA-12 is pretty badass. It's got a good magazine size, fire rate, and an honest-to-god decent spread. The downsides of this weapon, however, are the short range, kinda small ammo pool, and very low damage. To boost our range, all we gotta do is grab the longshot trait. And for some more ammo, we can just run Gunslinger. For damage, I decided to run a status setup. Twisting Wounds lets us apply bleeding on crits or weak spot hits, as well as boosting our weapon's damage against bleeding targets. Bleed lets us run Abrasive Whetstone, boosting our crit chance and damage. Using Timekeeper's Jewel, we can double the duration of our statuses. This makes Overloaded applications from Overflow and Corroded from Nebula both last 30 seconds. 3 unique status effects lets a Hane Crystal boost our total damage against said targets by 15%. Shard Banded Ring boosts our Overloaded blasts and weapon damage during Overflow by 12%, and Stone of Balance improves all of our damage by an additional 7%. And then I went with the typical spread reduction, crit chance, and crit damage fragments. Oh yeah, I also picked up Handler because I wanted to use it for at least one of these builds. The Dog Distraction occasionally helps you deal some damage from a safe distance. With this setup, you can fairly easily 2-tap most basic trash mobs. It's pretty satisfying, just dumping shell after shell into an elite or boss's weak spot. As long as you manage your 3 statuses, you're putting out some pretty good damage. As a big fan of automatic shotguns, I'm gonna go ahead and mark this as apocalypse ready. Wrapping things up, we're moving on to the secondary shotguns, starting with the double barrel. This sidearm is a distant cousin of the sawed-off from Remnant 1. They even share the same firing sound. Much like its relative, this weapon packs a mean punch in a small package. It does, however, share the same problem with the coach gun, being the magazine size. That, coupled with its very low ideal range of 7 meters, makes this weapon very much suited for close quarters combat. Just like the coach gun, we can equip it with Extender to bring its mag size up to 3. The longshot trait also helps out its pitiful range, and the usual spread reduction sources do the rest. As Fumetto said in his tier list, this weapon can basically be your primary weapon, so that's how we're going to treat it. Using Archon, we can boost our mods to absurd levels. Corrosive Rounds has a base mod cost of 1250. Using Archon, some trinkets, and the mod cost fragment, we can cut that cost in half. We essentially turn the weapon into a pure mod damage gun. Since the mod is almost always up, we don't have to worry about investing in range damage. The results are, well, most of you know how strong Archon is, so I won't spend much time talking about it. Basic trash falls in 1 to 2 shots, and the boost to Corroded Stot make it pretty good at finishing off enemies. Even with Longshot invested, you can still end up losing damage at a medium range, but that's why you have your long gun. However, in my case, I brought the Sporebloom. My plan was to have a mod I could always cast to proc Archon's Prime perk. It worked well. Honestly, a little too well. I wasn't even aiming Spore Shot. I was just using it to proc the Prime perk and switching back. If it wasn't obvious enough, this weapon is Apocalypse ready. Last but not least, we have Rupture Cannon. This is basically an open mod version of the Defiler from the first game. I'll be honest, when I first started using this weapon, I was kinda disappointed. When I read the words pistol shotgun, I expected it to hit a little harder than what the numbers listed. And then I realized it actually has great potential. After all, the Bulldog has low damage, and it's still powerful. Starting off with the pros, it actually fires really fast. Faster than every other shotgun, minus the Sporebloom with Bandit. It also has a decent spread compared to every other shotgun. The ideal range of 13 meters is also pretty nice. And finally, the damage is actually serviceable. This is aided by the aforementioned fire rate. As for cons, the biggest one I personally have is with the reload speed. Considering you'll blow through ammo with this thing faster than even the Bulldog, you'll need something to boost reloads. Obviously, Hunter Gunslinger would be the best pick here, as is for most setups, and you know what? Fuck it. We're on the last weapon of the video and I really want to get to the end. On top of Hugs, I decided to go for a fire damage build with Hotshot. My trinkets boosted fire damage as well as improved reload speed and weak spot damage. For my fragments, I decided to fully eradicate both spread and recoil, turning this weapon into a glorified laser pointer. Surprise surprise, the gun can shred now. And just like the Bulldog, you can pretty easily 2-tap most basic enemies. I especially like how fast this thing fires with Bulletstorm. Now you see why I opted to reduce recoil. I still suck when it comes to aiming, but this weapon managed to shatter my preconceptions, so I'll go ahead and say it's Apocalypse ready. Well, that's every shotgun in Remnant 2. If we get any more in the DLC, I'll be sure to cover them. What category would you like to see next? And let me know how you think I should do this series. I seriously don't want to do just Hugs or one of the other combos of Challenger, Hunter, Gunslinger for every weapon, even though they are the optimal combos for most range builds. Let me know what you all think I should do. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.